Hello and welcome to the World Football Show here on Sports Tonight Live. I'm Mina Rzouki and I'm joined by my co-presenter Gab Marcotti. And for the first part, we'll be discussing the African Cup of Nations. And with us today, we've got Oba Amokomomo, and he will be discussing everything that happened with the final yesterday, which was one of the most emotional finals between, of course, Ivory Coast and Zambia. So, did you turn Zambian for the night?
Oh, well, it was quite emotional, and like rightly said, and for a lot of reasons. First, they lost a host of generations about almost 20 years ago, and it was an extra motivating factor for the Zambian to ensure that they qualify to the final so that they can go to Libreville and play the African Cup of Nations finals, which turned out well for them in the end. And nobody gave them any chance from the inception of the competitions. Not that they were not good, but probably not good enough to win the trophy. They were the pre-tournament favorites like Senegal, Ghana, Ivory Coast. And there's no reason to doubt that they're pre-tournament favorites, considering the plethora of plethora of stars they've got in their team. But this competition of this magnitude is usually...
Oh, but the remarkable thing, I mean, obviously, this whole business with the anniversary of the tragic 1993 plane crash, which, of course, happened just off the coast of Gabon. But beyond that, what strikes me about the Zambia team is that Zambia's produced great footballers in the past. Obviously, Kalusha Bwalia, the most famous one. But you look at these guys, and out of the entire team, you have two players who play in Europe.
Yep.
One of them plays for a team called Ural Oblast in the second or third division in Russia. The other one, of course, is Mayuko, plays for exactly Young Boys. Yeah. But you look at this, and Chris Katongo plays in China. I mean, there's a whole bunch of players playing in Congo for TB Mazembe, some of them locally in Zambia. I mean, in terms of sort of the big names everybody expected, they just weren't there. Is there a broader message here about that maybe we pay too much attention to the big stars who play in the big leagues?
I think it's a warning call to the bigger teams not to underrate the lesser teams. And secondly, it reminds me of the Euro 2004 when Greece surprisingly won the, everyone is still surprised till date, I'm sure, they surprisingly won the European Cup of Nations. Football is a team game. And you could see that in the Zambian team. It was won on sheer team spirit, organization, determination, and of course there was an extra motivating factor that they want to play for their fallen heroes who died in Gabon years ago.
That was very much what the line that they were going through. They were like, you may have the stars, but we have team ethics. We're organized, we have team value, we play together. And you have individual talent on Ivory Coast, but you could really see the Zambian team sort of sacrificing for one another. Yep. I thought Mayuko was absolutely splendid, and the centre-back was Suzu.
That's his name.
Yeah, he was absolutely fantastic, as well as their goalkeeper. Yeah. So do you think it's a case of if you do have a great team, then, I mean, I always remember sort of Italy in 2006, and it's not the greatest team that I've ever seen from Italy. You're disagreeing, but I think for me that they were just the best team because they were really united, and that's exactly what you saw with Zambia.
I mean, in any team sport, the first and most important thing is to play well as a team. Now, I'm not excluding the fact that you need one or two superstars who can do the magic.
Of course,
but first and foremost, and the experience. But first and foremost, what matters most is you need to play well as a team, and they're more or less playing for. They haven't got anything to lose in the sense. A lot of them are not well known. Even the coach is virtually unknown in France. He was once a fitness trainer, and they have everything to play for to show that they've come of age. And one thing that we should realize as well is that this Zambian team has been together for close to about 4 to 5 years. Yes. So they've fused together over time. They've grown together over time, and they've got an FA chairman, Kalusha Bwalia, who incidentally could have been part of that plane crash as well, too, who want to see development in the Zambian football team, and one can only watch out for them in the next subsequent years to come through. There's the next African Cup of Nations coming up next year. There's the World Cup qualifiers coming up next year, and incidentally as well, they'll be playing alongside Ghana. So they are becoming a force to reckon with.
Now, to be fair, though, we talked about the importance of unity and team spirit. I think we need to spend a word too about on Ivory Coast.
Yeah,
on the one hand, they're not going to get much sympathy because they've got all the millionaire superstars and they're packed with talent. But I thought they went into this tournament with a humility, which they've never had in the past, when they tended to self-destruct. The Ivorian FA made a choice, said no more high-priced foreign, European or Brazilian manager. We're going to go with one of our own, Francois Zahoui, and they played throughout the tournament with, some people say they're a bit defensive, but such discipline, such single-mindedness. In the end, Drogba misses the penalty in the final, and we get the fairy tale ending that most neutrals wanted Zambia. But I think Ivory Coast showed tremendous maturity in that tournament. Would you agree?
Yeah, in a sense. I think they gave their all. I don't think I would expect anything much more than what they've delivered. Of course, I would have expected their firepower up front, the likes of Drogba, the likes of Claudio, Javier to probably be bringing in the goals, considering the fact that they've got a well-disciplined defense. But then again, they're a top team. They should win the tournament, and I've said in time past, if they don't win this tournament at this time, considering the fact that the big names are not even there at the moment, then it's going to take a long while, because don't forget Drogba is 33.
Well, I was going to say, I've watched a little bit of Ivory Coast over that, and they seem to be a team that was opportunistic. They sort of exploited all the chances that the other team, every time there was a mistake made by the opposing team, they would, latch onto it. A lot of their goals came from sort of set pieces. They were awarded, obviously, a penalty that Drogba missed, and this was the second one he missed in the final. Do you think that overall their style of playing was a little bit too conservative, considering that they had the firepower and they had the sort of team that could sort of go all guns blazing?
I wouldn't think they were too conservative. I probably see quite a great deal of individualism among some of the star players. If they had played as much as a team and as cohesive as the Zambian team, they probably would have easily won the tournament. But the question wasn't particularly there. Of course, fair enough, they've got a well-disciplined defense, but the question wasn't there overall, and no surprise that they didn't win eventually.
Let's touching on the final a bit. I thought that penalty shootout was one of the most dramatic sequences.
Emotional, I was crying.
Unfortunately, I don't know what broadcaster you guys watched it on. Unfortunately, I watched it on a channel where the commentator felt the need to talk over everything, which meant, I couldn't hear the singing. You could just kind of make it up in the background. But you always hear from penalty shootouts that, it's a psychological thing as much as a technical thing. And as a manager, you want to pick penalty takers who are up for it, not necessarily your best guys. And I was flabbergasted when, Ivory Coast, two veterans, two people who, are the big stars, Gervinho and Kolo Touré, were not part of the first 5 penalty takers. And it's emerged since then, it's been reported that the manager didn't think they were in the right frame of mind. Probably they didn't think that they were in the right frame of mind. There were reports that Zahoui had to shout at Gervinho to get him to go and take the penalty.
Well, I'm not saying it's an excuse. I don't blame them for not going or not venturing forward to go and take penalties. If you look at antecedents in the past, whenever games stretch into penalties, it's usually a huge pressure on a star player to go out and play penalties. So I guess probably that's why they were a little bit scared. I remember in the 2006 African Cup of Nations when Nigeria played the quarterfinals with Tunisia, it got to the point whereby a player had to go out and they were trying to urge Kanu to go and play the penalty, and eventually, reluctantly, he went to take the penalty and he scored. But the pressure is usually huge on the star players.
That's why you're the star player. That's why you're the guy people look to.
Exactly, and they make money.
Look, I look at Chris Katongo, going up there. He's the star player for the other team. He's the captain. He's, kind of like the father of the other team. He's got all this pressure on him, and he goes and he converts the penalty.
Well, you have to consider that he's not a star player if we are to look at the world, we have to look at it from a global perspective. Everybody knows Drogba.
So you're saying the more famous you are, the more pressure that there is.
The more pressure there is for you, and the more it is for you to deliver. And if you fail, look at what happened to Gian. That's Asma Gian has lost penalty on 3 different occasions.
Yeah,
first in 2006, 2010, and against Zambia. So I've seen that antecedent in the past. So most of the time, top star players tend to be reluctant in taking penalties unless you're super confident, like probably players like Messi, who still get to lose penalty every now and then, you know.
Well, and Drogba ultimately they're confident too. It's just that he missed the one during the game. But for me at least, going into the tournament, I didn't like Equatorial Guinea at all. I don't like what they stand for, the people behind it.
Yeah.
And I looked at this and I thought, I approached it with a lot of curiosity, but I said ultimately, God, it's an African Nations Cup without Cameroon, without your Super Eagles, without Bafana, without Egypt, and without Algeria also qualified World Cup. And I was like, okay, I'm all excited to discover Sudan and whatnot, but is it going to be great? And I saw what Zambia did, what I thought Mali also played well, Tunisia had their moments, Guinea without question. Is there a shift is Africa now a much deeper continent, so we shouldn't take it for granted that there is going to be a gap between sort of your Nigerias and Cameroons and Egypt and the rest? Or is it a case that it was just a blip this time around and next time the big boys will all come back and at least be in the tournament?
I think we can look at it from two angles. Yeah, there could be a paradigm shift in the dominance of football from certain football powers like Nigeria and Egypt. That's on one hand. And it could be a wake-up call to some of the so-called big teams that, look, you cannot afford to rest on your oars. You have to work hard this time. Soccer is not just going to come at on a platter of gold. You have to work hard for it. And I believe they'll become better for it. Even Brazil at the moment are, in a sense, struggling, So I think there's that shift, and people are becoming more aware that anybody can play football, particularly in Africa. It's really, really changing. I can remember some of the qualifying games where Nigeria really struggled. So it just goes to show that the big teams need to sort of wake up, and on the other hand as well to Zambia winning, creating history. I mean, I've been following the African Cup of Nations for the past 24 years or so. Most of the teams that have won the African Cup of Nations have been literally the same. This is the first time in my lifetime I'm seeing a brand new winner.
So, it's like, finally.
You've had enough of Egypt. No more Shahata. I've had it.
And the 3-5-2 formation.
So I think Zambia winning this competition will sort of ginger the so-called lesser or the middle-class teams that we can do it as well.
Do you think this will bring more, who was your player of the whole tournament? Do you think this will bring more attention to them, to the likes of the, to the Zambian team, the star players that they had over there? Do you think that this could be their chance to move to Europe?
Definitely. I see some of their players, the likes of, I see Mayuka probably moving to a much more bigger club. I've seen the likes of Rainford Calabar probably move. He plays at the moment for TZ Mazembe, who coincidentally
big club in Africa. They a lot of money too.
Yeah, they played against Inter Milan, the World Club Championship. Yeah. I see the likes of Cristiano have played in Europe for about 4 years before moving to China, which I think he moved because of the money. Really.
Right. So, but even in Europe, he was playing for Armenia, Bielefeld, clubs like that.
Skonti, Ziani, and whatever. But I think it's going to open the door for Zambia, particularly at this point in time.
Mayuka,
Wane, the goalkeeper, top class goalkeeper, is one of the best keepers.
I wanted to ask about that
because it was so different.
Seriously, like between the John Cena move and the guy saves the penalty.
What was that, by the way?
Okay, you're clearly not a professional wrestling fan. Are you? Do you know what that was?
No.
My mother was outraged.
There's a WWE wrestler called named John Cena who does it. This is sort of one of his signature moves. He goes like this, kind of like you can't see me. It's got a name which I might be getting wrong, but. I don't know. It just livened the whole thing up all of a sudden. But for somebody to have the confidence, he saves it. And do we know? Was he actually the fourth penalty he took?
Yes.
It was the fourth. I think it was the fourth.
The last one.
It was the last one.
Yeah.
Well, the last one of the five.
The five, yeah.
But was he just the designated fifth penalty taker, or did he just say, "All right"?
I'm going to go ahead, and I'm so confident.
I remember very well in 2010 when they played against Nigeria. Coincidentally, it was a tense game. I had my heart in my mouth most of the time, and eventually went to penalties. And after the Nigerian goalkeeper went, and he came out as well too, and he took the penalty, and he's been taking penalties for his club as well.
Right.
So it's not something that...
So it wasn't such a big surprise.
It's only a big surprise that he scored. He's been doing that for his club as well. He's the captain of his club. He's one of the best goalkeepers in South Africa, and he probably might make a big move to Europe. I know Europe is not really in need of keepers per se, but in South Africa, he's such a huge star over there, and it might not necessarily be the best keeper, but he's got this charisma about him.
He's got tremendous presence as well, and leadership.
He carries himself very well. So
let's have I want to see a quick, if we can have a look at all the Twitter reaction that we received, or that was out in the Twitter sphere after the game. So we've got Robin van Persie. A shame my friends Colo and Jorginho missed. It happens to the best. Congrats to Zambia, first ever win of the African Nations Cup. Says Fabregas. So of course there was the Rooney one. There's Jack Wilshere, congratulations to Zambia, but it is crazy over there now. Let the party begin.
Yeah, it's quite remarkable. What I thought, I don't know, 2 years ago I wasn't on Twitter, so I don't know, but I feel as if this African Cup of Nations, maybe because of Twitter, there's a lot more involvement here, also from from a lot of these big European-based footballers who also wanted to, drop in, check in on how their teammates were doing out there, but to me, it certainly added to the experience.
I think it's I was looking at 2 different social networks at the same time, Twitter and Facebook as well, and trying to read reactions, and it sort of broadened the scope of the game, not just for African Cup of Nations, globally as well too, and it's contributed a lot of a great deal to the game, no doubt about that. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's all we have time for on the African Cup of Nations. Thank you to Oba for joining us for this part. But when we get back, we discuss the best of Europe, and we'll have Andy Brassell with us, the European football expert. So we'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Welcome back to the World Football Show. I'm Gabriele Marcotti, and I'm joined by, as always, Mina Rzouki, and I'm delighted that I have another tall European football-loving person in our midst.
He's obsessed with height.
Well, you want to talk, but you might have heard Mina earlier introduce him as the European football expert. So, Andy,
a lot to live up to.
She's setting the bar really, really high for you. But seriously, it's a pleasure to have you here. Anybody who follows you on Twitter or follows the stuff you write or your appearances on the radio knows that you're one of those people who spends a lot of time and energy on this and knows what they're talking about. But let's start with a conundrum, at least conundrum for some, Barcelona, because I wrote about them today in my column, and you look at this, the points total this season projects out to, I think, something like 83 points, which would be 13 points fewer than they got last season. Mm-hmm. And at the weekend, Osasuna are what they are. You can blame the frozen pitch or whatever, but bottom line is they lost 3-2. Mm-hmm. Mina, was this coming?
To be honest, I felt a little bit sorry for them, and that people always accuse me of sort of going anti-Barcelona, but on the referees are actually abysmal in Spain, and I complain a lot about Serie A refereeing, but this was, in my opinion, abysmal. However, you make your own luck, and I do think for a lot of the time Barcelona had a terrible first half, and no matter what excuses you can give them, the icy pitch, whatever you want, the point is, it seems to me that they've made it very clear that they're not after the Liga, they're after the Champions League, and that shows. When they were going down, they needed to get back and score, and what does Pep Guardiola do? He then decides to bring on Teo and Cuenca instead of bringing Xavi and Iniesta, and I think that's a clear sign of what his intent is for this year.
Maybe that's the case, but I don't think it's just a case of team selection. I think this is a problem that's gone unaddressed for a number of months. Really, really poor away form. And this is what's going to make the difference in the end, the fact that Real Madrid are so relentless. They make it look so effortless when they go away to difficult places. Yeah. And Barcelona have really struggled. The only decent away performance they've had in La Liga in the last couple of months, about 3 weeks ago in Malaga. And Malaga were A, at a really low ebb, B, without their best player in Jérémy Toulalan, who was on 4 bookings for a very long time, took his 5th, so he missed the Barcelona one and not the derby against Sevilla, because they thought, well, we can just write this one off, this isn't our battle. So really, this is a problem that that I think Guardiola should have had a look at before. You know, and they've looked so short of ideas in some of these games.
Have a look at how. I mean, I agree with you. The idea that, you know, there's so much hype about La Masia and the Cantera and whatever. And so, you know, I'm one of those people who say, like, well, take it easy. You know, some of these guys who come up are good. Some of these guys maybe aren't ready. Jonathan Dos Santos or Giovanni Dos Santos, for that matter. But, you know, he had basically his first choice back forward, his first choice goalkeeper.
It's true.
You know, up front it was Pedrito, Alexis Sanchez, and that guy Messi. It was just in midfield where he played the Sergio Roberto, who I think this is only his second ever start for Barcelona. You know, he'd been in the Barcelona B side, but
it's a very difficult second start away at Osasuna as well. There's no doubt about that. I know it's a cliche, but it is a very, very difficult place to go. But I think
so. Is that where Guardiola screwed up? I mean, is it a personnel issue at that stage?
I don't think that's the overriding issue. I think that's something you can argue, certainly, and I think that's contributed. But I just think because we're so obsessed with the stats of Barcelona, their record breaking, we always talk about the incredible amount of possession they have. It doesn't mean anything if you can't stop counter-attacks and if you can't make the most of your own chances. If you go back to their shock defeat at the beginning of last season against Ocoletes, of course, aren't even in La Liga anymore. They're in La Segunda. They had, I think, 84% possession in that, and you know they were probably lucky not to lose 3 or 4-0.
That's 68% against possession against Osasuna.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which
sounds a lot like Roma,
which is remarkable. Yeah, sounds a lot like bad Roma.
Bad Roma. 90% possession, 1 shot on goal.
What do you make of the people have talked about, you know, the injuries this season? Is that an alibi? Because I actually kind of looked at some numbers, and yes, obviously there, you know, Alexis Sanchez had to spell out, Iniesta had to spell out, Piqué, but ultimately injuries-wise, you know, last season you had. I mean, certainly Puyol and Abidal are 2 guys who missed more time last season than this season, as did Busquets as well. So it kind of nets out, doesn't it?
But it kind of happened all of a sudden. It's like, you know, they're left with such a small squad. And it's almost like they've gone 5 years with Xavi being at his best, Messi at his best, Iniesta at his best, barring, let's say, a few injuries with Iniesta. But and I found it astonishing how you can go that many years with, like, you know.
But if you like, it's kind of like the curse of La Masia, because you build this personality that they have to come up with. You know, you really have to learn to play for Barcelona. You're not just a great player and you're born to it. And I think that's very difficult. I think if you look in the past about how Chigrinsky didn't fit in at all, despite being a very good defender, because, you know, he just looked like Bambi on roller skates in that team. If you look at even Cesc, he's Premier League Cesc, who they've got back. He's not La Masia Cesc. He has to learn to play with them again to find a real role in that team.
Let's get a take now from our favorite Liga blogger, La Liga Loca. It's Tim Stannard. Tim, Mina, I guess you were listening in. We want to get your take on Barcelona. Mina just suggested that, you know, maybe they weren't as deep. Evidently, having 2 rubbish players like Cesc Fabregas and Thiago Alcantara backing up Xavi and Iniesta isn't good enough, right? What's your take?
No, but Theo is good enough.
Well, I think that Pep Guardiola, this is going to sound a bit crazy because it may have cost him the league, made the only decision he could make by, as you said earlier, having a very good front 3 but a very weakened midfield 11 with Sergio Roberto, Mascherano and Thiago there as well. The league was lost before the Osasuna game, and he's only got a certain amount of energy, you could say, a certain amount of resources in the side. There was that draining cup game against Valencia. That was successful. They're in through to the cup final, and of course they got the Champions League game on Tuesday. Can you imagine what would have happened had they played Xavi Hernandez, Iniesta, one of those 2 players who maybe are not quite fit, picked up a knock, out for much longer, and that cost them the Champions League campaign. That's 2 campaigns gone. So Pep Guardiola made the right call, I think, long term. The only call he could make was to gamble a little bit and hope that some of the younger players in midfield could pull through. And to tell the truth, I think you can blame much of the defeat on Gerard Piqué, who was dreadful in that game, and had he done his job properly, it might have been a very different result.
Want to get you on Real Madrid as well, because obviously they go a goal down against Levante. I'm imagining these heroics. And by the way, this is a good time as any to mention my favorite YouTube clip of all time, which is Ballesteros at age 49, and the size of a refrigerator.
No hyperbole there whatsoever.
Sprinting and outrunning.
Out sprinting Ronaldo. He even gives Ronaldo a few meters. It's brilliant.
It is the coolest thing in the world.
His whole life depended on that sprint.
No, seriously, it is the coolest thing in the world. But they go a goal down, and you're wondering for a minute there, and then boom, they just all clicks into gear. Even with El Pirata Granero in midfield, which I didn't quite understand unless Mourinho wanted to reward his boy. You saw it going that way, right, Andy? I mean, was there a sense of inevitability, or was that penalty really the turning point?
Well, there is generally a sense of inevitability, I think, with Real Madrid this season, because that they are so powerful. And I think Benzema's really the image of that more than Ronaldo. He had a good season last season, but yet he went to this fat camp at Italy before the start of the season. And Mourinho said to him, look, I just want you hungry the whole time, just never giving an inch. You're a great player, but you've got to become even better, move yourself, or words to that effect in French. And I think really he's in microcosm, that little, 3% in which they've improved.
But I think, Levante has always proved to be quite a difficult team, or has been at least, psychologically for Real Madrid.
Yeah.
And I think, when people who sit there and boo Ronaldo and wonder, that he's not the greatest, yesterday he was magnificent. I mean, surely he's got to be heralded as their greatest player to have played for them, because of just simply what he does.
Whatever.
Yeah, I would probably say so.
Well,
I mean, along the lines of Di Stefano.
It was a very similar performance on Real Madrid. Really slack, really lazy in the opening minutes. They conceded goals now against Athletic Bilbao, who scored first against Malaga.
And again, it was a set piece.
So it's very familiar. They let the teams go 1-0 up, and then they kind of get interested and then pull it back to make things exciting.
Tim, we wouldn't be Real Madrid without the obligatory Mourinho question, because that's all anybody cares about here in England.
The new haircut, maybe?
What? Yeah, it's
nice.
not. You think so?
Yeah,
I don't quite go over that salt and pepper thing. But so he tells his good sources here in the English media that he's leaving at the end of the season, and what club will he choose? But then he tells Roberto Carlos, who I don't know if he's his new best friend or something, and Roberto Carlos tells the world, Mourinho's definitely staying. He's told me himself. Who do we believe? Which of Mourinho's mates do we believe? Roberto Carlos or the gentleman from the English press?
Or is he just wanting to be an enigma?
The ones that are probably going to get him his next job, so the ones in the English press. Did you happen to catch him after the game? He just looked, again, utterly miserable, even though he's probably won the league. And he even managed to have a dig at the fans as well, saying, at the Camp Nou, if you keep possession and pass and pass and pass, they applaud it, they love it. In the Santiago Bernabeu, if you keep possession and pass, they boo you. So he still managed to get a dig in there, so he's still not happy no matter what's happening there.
Maybe it's because Barcelona have a likable manager. Oops.
Not to Ibra, anyway.
Exactly, not to Ibra, yeah.
Or Etu.
Or Etu, yeah. Yes,
Or Ronaldinho.
Read out more names.
Easy there. Can you just tell us about this insanity with the Spanish Cup final? I mean, I know in my country we've kind of settled let's copy the English and have it in the same place every year. It seems like a good idea. In England, of course, except for when you're rebuilding the stadium, you'll have it at Wembley. What's going on with the Copa del Rey final?
Yeah, exactly. They're going to decide today, no?
They decided to make a decision a bit later on, and maybe there's going to be some wrangling going on in the background. Well, basically, the story is Real Madrid are coming up with all sort of excuses of why they don't want the Copa del Rey final between Barcelona and Athletic Bilbao to be played in the Santiago Bernabeu, which will be, of course, the biggest venue possible they could play it at. There's no neutral venue in Spain. It's considered rather like Italy. There's no Wembley Stadium. And, of course, Real Madrid would probably not enjoy Athletic Bilbao winning the cup there. They definitely wouldn't enjoy Barcelona winning the cup there. And there's been an awful lot of banter, you could say, between the press. But then again, would Manchester United allow Liverpool and Manchester City to play out the FA Cup final at Old Trafford? So it's a very similar situation, perhaps, as what could happen in England.
Can I make a suggestion? I know a big stadium that's nearly new, doesn't get enough usage, which is just a short EasyJet or Ryanair flight away from Bilbao and Barcelona. Why not have it at Wembley? And I'm sure the English would pay a lot of money for that.
That would be a fantastic idea, something I thought about, but you never know, they might think of that. But I have a feeling they were thinking about Vicente Calderon, but there's a concert going on there. It's probably going to be Mestalla, which again is just too small to fit in the amount of Athletic Bilbao fans and Barcelona ones who are going to go there. It's unlikely to happen at the Santiago Bernabeu. I don't think it's going to happen. They're talking about, well, they've got to redo the toilets at that particular date when they want to be final. But you can understand their point of view. Why would they want to have
and even
the coup of Barcelona fans and the players running around the Bernabeu celebrating the Copa del Rey?
All right, then. Thank you, Tim. Was going to ask you about Zaragoza, but we've run out of time on the Spanish segment. We'll see you next week.
That's right, Shane, because of course, on the day that Rangers go into administration, Portsmouth nearing administration, Zaragoza, they could well be next in line, which is a sad story.
Game against Espanyol yesterday.
And quite a glorious, historic Spanish club as well.
Exactly.
We're going to be back with some Bundesliga and maybe some Serie A as well, if you're lucky. Did you miss us? Well, don't worry, we're back. Gabriele Marcotti, and with me, as ever, is my co-presenter, Mina Rzouki. And this week, we're joined by the tall, handsome Andy Brassell, who is psyched to talk some Serie A.
Of course.
The best league.
Last time Inter lost to Novara, it cost Gian Gasperini his job. This time around, they somehow contrived to lose at home to Novara again. Is Ranieri on the wobble? Should he be on the wobble?
Well, he's only really there to stabilise the team, and they have had a really bad last couple of weeks. I'm not sure after that performance at Roma how much worse it could actually get. We all know they're not going to win the title. They should still get in the Champions League.
They have to leapfrog a bunch of clubs to do that.
They do certainly, but I think Udinese have got a problem. Of course, they lost at the weekend, and I wouldn't like to say that rules them out of the title race, but I think it knocks a lot of the wind out of them. Mauricio Isla is going to be out for the rest of the season, it looks like. Which
So
I
you think that's
is
why Inter
a huge blow as well? Yeah, I think they've got a little way to come back. I suppose the problem really for them is, it sounds ridiculous, but the return of Schneider, who was a problem for Gasperini, and now how does Ranieri use him best?
Well, you see, this isn't the thing. Everyone kept talking about, I personally think Ranieri was the right coach after Gasperini at the time. I thought he was the sort of the perfect plaster.
You mean this in absolute terms, not the right coach for Inter from a Juventus perspective?
No, the right coach for
Gasperini was the right coach for that.
Anyway, but my point was, for him, I think a lot was made of the fact that he managed all those back-to-back wins, which was 7 in the league, 8 overall. And I think when you look and you properly analyse all those games, they weren't actually playing that well. And a lot of the times they were, Fiorentina was the first winner of those consecutive ones, and they were up against a side that had no Montalivo in midfield, that had no Jovetic up top. And then they were against Genoa, who had no striker at the time, and they had to play with Eduardo, who'd only made 3 appearances. Parma, they had 6 shots on goal. They managed 5 goals. Parma's defence was, of course, they sacked their coach and went with Donadoni afterwards. So I think a lot was made of their consecutive wins, but in some ways, you could say that they were a little bit lucky to have gained all of those wins. And now we're seeing the fact that they are a team that needs to be properly looked at and addressed, with holes fixed. And
But is it a bit twisted that we start talking about this after a game like this, when in fact I thought the Snyder first of all I thought played very well. Snyder hit the woodwork, Pazzini had that chance at the end. Caracciolo, I don't care if he plays to be 100, he's never going to finish like that ever again. I mean, bizarrely, while I thought Ranieri made some silly choices like Kivu at left back and whatnot, but I thought Inter actually played certainly much better in this game than they did against Roma, where they couldn't have played any worse.
I agree with that, but I also think they got tactics wrong. I just don't understand, I mean, I understand Maicon wasn't available, but they sort of had no width to start with, and they kept going down the middle, and when you're playing a side like Novara, who love to sit deep and then counter, you're just playing right into their hands by going down the middle.
But don't you think Ranieri's a coach to do a job? He's a coach to salvage what was, within a month or two, a complete mess of a season. I think when you talk about Kivu, the really concerning thing is they're looking at offering him a new deal. And that makes me think, where's the direction of the club?
I have to say, on that point, that story comes from Kivu's agent.
Yes,
It's
very much so.
you know,
Paying the press.
yeah, it's like me saying I want to go on a date with Angelina Jolie. You know,
And she's considering it now.
Exactly. There you go. Want to touch upon Milan as well, because I thought this game that they had against Udinese on Saturday was really pivotal. I mean, if Milan go on to win the title, this could be a turning point of the season. So they're out there. They've got all their injuries that we know about: Aquilani, Boateng, Nesta. There's Cassano, of course. There's no Ibra, of course, who's suspended. They're playing Udinese, who've got this ridiculous record at home. They're terrible in the first half. They go a goal down. Udinese could score 2, 3, and then boom, Mina. They conjure up 2 goals.
It's funny you said that, because when you were saying about this could be the turning point, I very much thought this could be the turning point. I mean, they were, some of the players were saying afterwards that they went into the dressing room and at half time and they were like, we've got to do this. This is now it's now or sort of never. We have to show that, we have what it takes. And I thought Maxi Lopez was terrific in that match.
That is true. I mean, he couldn't be more of a water carrier if he had Maxi sewn on a little badge on his breast. But he's really done his job. And I'm sure they'll get rid of him at the end of the season. But I think this situation with Ibra has given him a chance that maybe he wouldn't have otherwise.
I'm on the record. I would have never signed this guy because I think he cracks El Shaarawy's style. But on the day, you're certainly grateful if you're a Milan fan that Maxi was there. Joining us is Tancredi Palmeri, Tancredible, how some people like to call him. Tancredi, we were just saying, Milan's win in Udine was, if they go on to win the title, will this game be remembered as a turning point?
Yes, or maybe if they would have lost the title, they would have lost the game. Juventus would have remembered that game as the turning point, because seriously, after the first half, I said, okay, or Allegri is gonna kick some bottoms, if I can say that, or something. I don't know what is gonna happen in the first half, because it was so poor from Milan, and considering how important was the game, that simply worse can't be, worse couldn't be. And I want you talk about El Shaarawy, you talk about Maxi Lopez. What has impressed me, but in a negative way, was the performance of Robinho. That, I mean, if you look at the lineup of Milan, the man that should have do the game was, without any doubt, Robinho. If you look at his age, his skills, his experience, he should have been the leader on the game. And so far, when he has been alone with to carry that shoulder, that weight on the shoulders, always he has failed. I'm not amongst that one that say that Robinho is a failure for Milan, because I think he's doing quite good. But in the moment that is asked to him to be the leader, he's never there.
Andy, Tancredi obviously not number one on Robinho's Christmas list, but it is an issue, right? Because obviously Ibra, with an eye towards the Champions League, which always remains the priority for Milan going forward. At some point when Allegri has to decide his best 11, we know Ibra will definitely be there. We know Van Bommel and Nocerino will, I presume, definitely be there. Beyond that, it's kind of a free-for-all. Do you think that, when everybody's reasonably fit, do you think that there is a natural place for Robinho, or should Allegri be thinking, let me find a way to integrate El Shaarawy in there, or possibly Cassano when he returns?
Well, El Shaarawy's demanding inclusion, like the last couple of weeks.
You drop Robinho?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the thing is...
Wait, you drop him when there's Ibra available?
Yeah.
So you would play Shaarawy with
Ibra?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I mean, the thing is, Arsenal are defensively not the best. I think that's fair to say. And of course, Mertesacker got an injury at the weekend. They're already struggling for numbers. And El Shaarawy's just got that zest about him, I think they should ride that out.
But, as much as Robinho misses sitters, and left, right and centre, I think he's very important for Ibra's style of play. The way that he carries defenders away from him. He's very good at sort of taking them one-on-one. And he creates space. I think he's quite efficient in the tactics that they're playing now, and alongside Ibra, I can't think of anyone better. It's just a shame that Robinho can't score and doesn't have all of that.
As I said before, Robinho's performances are so different when he has Ibrahimovic beside him, or he is not Ibrahimovic. So I don't think, honestly, that Allegri will line out Robinho, even if for the level of El Shaarawy in these last games. I mean, everyone would play him. Sometimes in Champions League, sometimes you need to be brave enough to risk with some players, because if that is the momentum, why not? Why don't do that?
Mm-hmm. Tancredi, I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were talking about how, was it you, Mina?
Maybe.
It might have been Mina. But we were talking about, I don't think that there is another team in Europe that has as many, I don't want to say great strikers, but certainly strikers who are paid like great strikers as Milan. Because, of course, there's also Pato, who nobody has mentioned. And obviously, just for the record, there's Cristiano, there's, for a while at least, Super Pippo Inzaghi, there's El Shaarawy, there's Robinho, there's Maxi Lopez, there's Ibrahimovic. I mean, it's ridiculous. 7 guys for a team that plays 2 guys up front. You're in Milan, you know, I'm sure you get to speak to Galliani and Braida. Does anybody ever ask them the question, what is the logic here? Is there a thought process? Or are you just kind of playing panini stickers and trying to accumulate as many people as possible? I mean, is there a long-term view? Does Allegri have a long-term opinion on this?
Well, let's say
and thank goodness Tevez didn't come, by the way. Thank goodness.
Because I bet Maxi Lopez would still be there, even if Tevez was there.
Sorry, Tank.
Well, let's say that in some way they had luck in this 1.5 years to skip that question sometimes, because it was a kind of natural turnover that led them, okay, you have Ibrahimovic in, Ibrahimovic is suspended for 6 games on 8, Pato get in. Pato get injured, Ibrahimovic is back. Robinho plays, Robinho is out, Cassano come back from injury. So in some way, it's true, in my opinion, too, they probably have, they might be as numbers the best forwards in Europe, because in the end, Real Madrid got just Higuain and Benzema as pure forwards, and Barcelona got probably the best one, but the best 3 or 3.5, 4, but they have 6 that could play almost everywhere in Europe, but they could never have like 6 fitting in the right moment, in the same moment, saying, letting Allegri pick which one he wanted the best. So this was the kind of, and they were almost putting in also Tevez. Let's don't forget that.
Well, it's funny because the only other team in Europe that I can think of that came close to this earlier in the season were Chelsea, when they had Anelka and Lukaku and Kalou, and these guys were on the bench, they couldn't get a game, and boy, aren't Chelsea doing great this year. But
what is it about them? Like, why is there so many injuries? And it's year in and year out, and it's the same injuries, and they always have no squad.
We need to get Tancredi on this, because Tancredi, when you're in Milan, and if you go speak to them, you go to Milanello, they start talking about this magnificent place called Milan Lab, where there's the guru, the Professor René Merseman. And I was always raised to say that, like, we have the best doctors and specialists in the world, and in England they have witch doctors, and Jack Wilshere gets injured and he doesn't come back forever. And but it's all rubbish. It's actually Milan's doctors. What's up with these people? How can people always be hurt? It's not normal.
Is it a case of maybe they're just superstitious? Maybe they're doing something. I mean, at the time with Juventus, we thought Vinovo was cursed.
I think the less you talk about Juventus and doctors, the better. Sorry. Sorry,
well, actually, in the last year, the heads of Milan Lab have changed, and I don't think it was just a turnover because of ages, someone that was getting too much old. I think that the best example of this something is seriously not going the right way is, of course, Alessandro Pato, that is always having the same kind of injuries. But at the same time, you should just do one comparison. And I'm not meaning nothing with this. I'm just saying that probably something in preparation in athletics was something probably planned wrong. If you take Pato, when in the first year he was in Milan, and Pato now, I mean, of course, the guy turning from 18 years old to 21, 22, put up a bit more of muscles, but in some ways seemed that they charged too much with, pointing on having a more powerful striker, and so charging too much his muscles. And that's why, actually, in the last year, always the injuries of Pato were affecting his muscles. Probably it was just a bad planning, and it's not a coincidence that the heads of Milan Lab were changed for that.
Tancredi,
Nobody,
thank
of
you.
course, declared that officially. But, you know, after 2 years that you went on saying, wow, we don't have the money of Real or Barcelona, but guys, we have Milan Lab. And
Thank you, Tancredi. There you go. See, Pato.
By the way, one thing for the record, I'm not in the Christmas list of Robinho, but I'm probably on his pizza list because the time that he considered me an interview, it was because he didn't want an address as pizza boy when he ordered this pizza in the night in the Brazil concentration camp in Estonia. So there is some pizza for Robinho. He knows that I can be always there.
There you go. Where else do you get pizza, Robinho, and Estonia all in the same conversation, but here on the World Football Show? If you're wondering why we didn't talk about too many other games, it's because it's freezing cold in Italy, and half of them were called off. But we do have a special treat.
Game. Yes, we do have a special treat. I was going to say Juventus was called off, but we're not going to mourn that anymore.
But we do have a special treat, and as you know, Mina and I, we like to put our dancing shoes on from time to time, and we live vicariously through the gestures of one Bobone Vieri. Vieri, of course, is a contestant on Italy's version of Strictly Come Dancing, and Andy, what do you make of it? Whoa.
Well, he's quite good this week. He's getting better.
He's no Russell Grant, it's fair to say.
It's just he's not, well, he's moving his legs a bit. He's just got no rhythm whatsoever.
Yeah, he was always light on his feet for a big guy, I thought, when he was a player. So, but perhaps that's come across.
He is somewhat rhythmically challenged, I will have you.
But he still hasn't been chucked off, so that's saying something.
No, there's no question. I think they also take that into account, your own physical limitations that you might have to overcome. You know, the Audley Harrison factor, or the Ann Widdecombe factor, if you prefer. We're going to be back with no more dancing in a short while. Stay with us.
Hello and welcome back to the World Football Show here on Sports Tonight Live. I'm Mina Rzouki and I'm joined by my co-host Gab Marcotti and of course Andy Brassell, and now we're discussing the Bundesliga. Of course, there was Hertha Berlin has now sacked their coach, Michael Skibbe, and
5 straight defeats. Fair enough. I never feel sorry for managers.
His players actually said you can understand why the club would do that.
Well, something they were saying actually in one of the German papers today is the penultimate game that he lost to Hanover. Their coach Mirko Slomka, he lost his first 6 in charge, but he saved them. He went on to save them from relegation and qualified for Europe the next season. So I think people tend to think that Skibber's not a great coach, but it's something intrinsically wrong with the structure and the culture of the club rather than the coach himself.
Why would you employ him when he's sort of been sacked from practically all
I've no idea.
The thing about Hertha Berlin, of course, is a few years ago they were doing great. They were close to the top of the table, and they were managed by a guy named Lucien Favre, who of course was also let go. Lucien Favre, now he's a coach of Borussia Mönchengladbach, who at times this season has played some of the best football in the Bundesliga.
Certainly.
And phenomenal again at the weekend, and a 3-0 hammering of Schalke, and it's like in the first half hour they just closed the game out.
3 points that almost equals 6.
What I think is interesting is the fact that since there's been the news at Christmas, the not very well kept secret, that Marco Reus, their star player, is going to leave. The surprise is, of course, that he's going to go to Borussia Dortmund in the summer and not Bayern Munich.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, A, their level's not dropped. B, his level's not dropped. C, the other players in the team have stepped up to almost compensate, to say, you know what, we're going to be okay when he goes. And it's really interesting because I think if you go back to last season, I went to see them almost exactly a year ago away at Wolfsburg, and it was a really cold Friday night. They lost. They were awful, bottom of the table by quite a long way. And Favre had absolutely no chance of saving them when he took over just after Christmas. But yet he did it, and he's kept on going, and it's absolutely extraordinary without a lot of money.
That second goal that they scored with that interplay, where they made one of my favorite figures of fun in European football, Mike Hanke, who is, I think, is just the worst striker who have ever played for Germany, arguably.
That's a big call after the late 90s.
Well, even today, I'm not sure. You get past Gomez and Klose, and you're in a world of Cacals and Podolskis and and freak shows like that.
Freak shows?
Well, relatively speaking. Mina, Arjen Robben benched 2 straight games at Bayern, and yet the man says he's fit, except for some premature baldness.
But did you see what Beckenbauer said afterwards? He said about how selfish he is, and even when he celebrates, it's a case of running towards his family as opposed to running towards his teammates, who are now probably thinking, why should I bother sending over a pass when he doesn't even celebrate with me? They were playing better with Arjen Robben. I can, personally speaking, I think so. And yesterday, and you could, when they were playing over the weekend, you could tell that, there's more balance within the side, of course.
But I wonder, do you think there's more balance in the side because Arjen Robben isn't there, or is there more balance in the side because Toni Kroos can actually play in his real position in the middle, and Thomas Muller, who I'm not a fan of at all, he can be shunted out wide where he does his sort of blocky runs into people. I think that actually has a lot to do with it. It just seems more rational.
Well, I think there are the 2 points. One, I think it's possibly something to do with dressing room morale, because Robben's never been the biggest team player, and they have had a wobble, certainly in terms of the spirit within the club. At the start of the season, they were super confident. They were saying, oh, everything's peace and love under Jupp Heynckes and everything's fine. But I think the other thing is that Ribéry's form this season, not just the way he's played, the way he's created and scored goals, but the way he showed a willingness to work for the team, has A, shown up Robben a little bit, and B, sort of diminished the need for him.
He won't be dropping Ribéry there, that's for sure. Borussia Dortmund, of course, also winning, still my favorites for the title. But Mina, is it some dream team time?
It is. It's my favorite part. It's my favorite part.
Bring it on.
It's our dream team, and we've got the results back. So, so we went from a 4-3-3 formation to a 4-4-2 formation to now what is it? A 4-3-1-2. That's it.
If you were Harry Redknapp, you'd just say run about a bit.
Yeah, exactly. Do you know what I mean?
Best
But
way
we've
to
got
deal
the
with it.
Tinkerman in charge as our producer. So let's look at the results. Of course, Raf went for Maradona. I mean, who was going to win against Maradona? And that was the number 10 choice, and 75% of them. I came second with Zidane with 15%. There's a huge difference there. Okay, but this week we're choosing strikers. So, the first one out of the two. Who's your choice, Andy, and tell us why?
Well, I remember when Karim Benzema signed for Real Madrid, and they said, are you excited about playing with Kaká and Ronaldo? And he said, well, it's a shame it's not the real Ronaldo.
Oh.
And I have to agree with him. I mean, of course,
Great.
Benzema loves him. He models his whole game on him. But I think that speaks for a lot of people in what Ronaldo gave to the game.
Yeah.
He was excellent at every club he was at, despite appalling injuries that would have finished a lesser man. And it really annoys me when people talk about his career and they say, what could he have done if he hadn't have suffered the injuries? But what about concentrating on what he did?
Did you?
The goals he scored in World Cups and for his clubs, he was phenomenal.
I'll give you a better
Ronaldo?
one. Also hampered by injuries, also achieved a lot, and maybe things always look better in the past with rose-tinted spectacles, but guy from my era, Marco van Basten.
That's your...
Yes, and he's the guy who's going to win, who should win.
You think he's better than all these guys?
With all these guys, all you mentioned is fat
Well,
Ronaldo.
Well, of course,
2.5 good seasons, yeah.
Fat Ronaldo. Okay, well, my choice is, he may not be the greatest player because I think Maradona is, but he's definitely the greatest striker to have ever walked the earth. And that is, of course, Pele. And I just don't understand how none of you even chose him. I mean, he was a magician. Body control, a powerful shot, headed. I mean, this guy scored over 1,281 goals in his career.
Archer Friedenreich scored more goals for Brazil, by the way.
Apparently so did Puskás. I'm not sure if that's true.
Well, I think the
I don't
point
think
with
Puskás was Brazilian.
the point with
No, as in,
Pele
sorry,
is he cheers so much for himself. I don't think we really need to do it for him.
Right. It's not a popularity contest.
Okay, but please do. We want you to come in and tweet us with your suggestions, or of course agree with one of us. That's it. So we've got Van Basten, Pele. What you want? Don't agree with Gab. Please agree with me this time. Thank God Raf is not here, and that's at ST World Football on Twitter. We are expecting your tweets as we speak. Thank you so much, Andy, for joining us. Did you have fun?
My pleasure. I did. Thank you.
Please come back.
Yeah, Gabriele doesn't want to deal with me alone.
But wingman.
Wingman. But we will see you next week, same time, same place, same football chat. See you then. Take care.